the state of hospitality, the state of nighttime economy is not in a good shape. Statistically, we're losing one pub every single day. I've been in this sector now for 30 years. I've never known it to be so bad. It's really, really bad. It's on a cliff edge. House music arrived at exactly the same time as ecstasy arrived. And I'm not joking. Everybody was off their tits.
What do you think was the first major problem that you were like, oh shit, I actually don't know how to fix this?
Probably the first time I was petrol bombed. Some of the rider requests we've had over the years, MIA wanted a 6-foot blue inflatable elephant. But there was one night in particular, Environmental Health told me if they get one more complaint from the prison, they're going to walk in, serve me paperwork, shut me down. They have to serve it on you. So we put a ladder up on the back wall. When Environmental Health entered the premises, I jibbed over the back wall on the ladder and I drove home and they couldn't serve anyone.
Sasha, thanks for being here.
No problem, thank you for inviting me.
We always start the podcast off the same way.
Yeah.
So who are you and what problem do you solve?
So I'm probably best known as being the founder of Warehouse Project and Parklife Festival. I was the first nighttime economy advisor for Greater Manchester. I think the problem that I'm solving at the moment has moved on a bit over the last few years, and that's the state of hospitality, the state of nighttime economy. It's not in a good shape. Previous to that, I mean, Parklife, 80,000 lunatics running wild in Eden Park. It's like whack-a-mole. I was problem solving every 5 minutes, like Portaloos are blocked or all sorts of things that are going on. So, I quite like problem solving.
Nice. Okay. And what would you say then? You touched on it then. The current symptoms. So if someone's listening to this and they are in that sector, what are the things they might be feeling or doing daily?
I think we're really lucky. We're sat here in Manchester today. Well, Salford, isn't it? Actually, not Manchester. Huge difference. Sorry. So we're sat in Salford, part of Greater Manchester, and the city at the moment is buzzing. You go out on a Saturday night, it's vibing, it's packed. We're outshining other cities. We're head and shoulders above London. But actually no one's making any money. Reason being the overheads are so high, the national insurance increase. It's very, very tough out there. I think it's going to get worse. Statistically, we're losing one pub every single day. For me, a pub is far more than just a pint. It's part of our social DNA. It's part of our fabric of society. I always think of my granddad when he lost my grandma. She passed away a few years before he did. He'd finish work, and at the end of the day, he'd finish work, go into the pub. Not a great business model for the landlord. He'd nurse the same pint for 2 hours, but he'd see all his mates, and you take that pub away, and he'd be sat in his front row, becoming lonely. So these are really important things. Since the last budget, we've had 240,000 job losses. Practically half of those are in hospitality. And when you dig down into the minutiae, a lot of those are young people who've lost their jobs. So you think about people who are working in a pub to support going through college or university, that kind of thing. So I've been in this sector now for 30 years. I've never known it to be so bad. It's really, really bad. It's on a cliff edge.
It feels like in every aspect of life, so hospitality, social media, careers, all these different things, we're all fighting for attention, and that is like the new oil. So if you take us back to maybe the start of your career, what did you learn in the early days about capturing attention that has kind of stuck with you throughout?
So go back into the very, very early days when I was starting at the Hacienda and places like that. There was no social media. There was no cesspit like Twitter. There was no Instagram. There was no bloody TikTok that I can spend hours on. It's so annoying. It sends me down rabbit holes. What put my head above the parapet was I was prepared to take more risks than other people. So I was running nights at the Hacienda, but I'd do things slightly differently. Whereas other student nights that were going on in Manchester at the time, you'd have all the ridiculous tracks. Like the last track would always be House of Pain. That's it. You'd have half an hour of 70s and 80s music. And it felt really patronising. So I thought, well, why don't we play the music that they play at the Hacienda on a Saturday night, but on a Tuesday night, make it more affordable for students, and it charged £2.50 on the door. And it worked. And, my nights at the Hacienda, my nights at Paradise Factory, Holy City Zoo, Generation X, we were selling out week after week after week. And then I took the mental decision to reopen Sankey Soap in 2000.
What do you think it was about the Hacienda? So, like, you remove social media, okay? And obviously, we're in our 30s. We grew up in this world with social media. So it was word of mouth. What was it that people were saying that they kept coming back for? Why do you think it spread like wildfire?
At the Hacienda at the weekends?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be blunt with this. House music arrived at exactly the same time as ecstasy arrived. And I'm not joking. That was it, and that was the explosion. Something happened below that roof that had never happened before in the UK. This music from America came over. Mike Pickering, Graham Park was playing it, John Da Silva. No one had ever heard that music before. And everybody was off their tits on ecstasy. And I went to a very good school, but I left with really poor qualifications. I left with 2 E's and a U. 2 U's and an E, sorry, 2 U's and an E. My first job was in a clothes shop, actually. Everybody else went on to Oxford or Cambridge. I was at Manchester Grammar. But when I was there in the sixth form, a friend of mine who was in the same class, Pete Armistead, who said, let's go to the Hacienda. And actually, the truth of the fact is, I'd heard all the cool kids talking about the Hacienda. So I borrowed my dad's suit, shirt, tie, queued up for 2 hours. We were really nervous about getting in, so I wasn't looking at what other people were wearing. Got to the front, and the doorman, who I now know is a guy called Damien Noonan, proper gangster, said, fuck off. And that was it. So I came back the following week in jeans and a T-shirt, and we walked in there, and there were 2,000 people going for it like we've never seen before. Because up until that point, all the clubs I've been going to, there was no mixing records. In between records, it was like, happy birthday, Sharon is 18 today. Or, drinks offers, or, Steve, your mum's waiting for at the front door. Those kind of things. And then this was just sounded like one long, solid record. And it was probably only 6 months after that Pete and I realised we were the only ones not on ecstasy. It was rife. And I can tell you, Greater Manchester Police didn't have a clue what was going on. They used to turn up en masse and walk through the venue, and the way they do it, and they still do it now actually for safety reasons, when they walk en masse through a venue, is they walk with their arms on shoulder to shoulder. But what the Hacienda clubbers used to do is to turn it into a conga. So you'd have Greater Manchester Police walking through in high-vis vests, and then you'd have 200 people behind them doing the conga, and they were like, why is everyone pulling these funny faces and licking their foreheads with no idea what's going on? That was. But everyone thinks the Hacienda was this amazing thing for 10 years. It wasn't. It lasted for 2 years at best.
Right.
That was it. And then, the story. Sadly, the gangs got involved because there was a lot of money in the drug scene and guns were involved, and it just lost it.
Wow. The bit that I'd be interested to know, because again, talking about it's a total different time. There's obviously, in putting a night on, so much networking that has to happen. You've got the doors to get on side, you've got the people to actually bring in and make it work, people behind the bar. Everyone's got to kind of be involved in that shared mission, which is maybe a skill that you just naturally have that people would wish they would have. But how do you get all those different people on the same page? So
from starting Sankey's to selling the Warehouse Project and Parklife, I always used the same suppliers from day one. I always made it my job to know every single person's name that was working at that venue. It was harder towards the end of Warehouse Project because the capacity was 10,000, so you'd have 300 security, you'd have 400 bar staff. It's impossible for me to learn those. But obviously, when it was at Store Street and capacity of 2,500, I would know absolutely everybody's name. I'd make a point of going around and saying, are you okay? Is that, how are you doing tonight? You having a good time? How's work with you? And I just think that's key. I learned that, actually. I have a few mentors that I really look up to. And I got that from Alex Ferguson, at Carrington. And I know you've already said you're not really into football.
We know that is, though.
Yeah, we know Alex Ferguson.
Sir Alex,
sorry.
Alex. So he would make an effort every single day at Carrington, whether it was the lady on reception who sadly passed away recently, the people working in catering, and he'd know everybody's name and he'd spend time with them. And I just think that's so valuable. And that's where promoters these days, I'm seeing young promoters come along and they're doing it so wrong because they get a couple of successes under the belt and then all of a sudden the backstage, popping the champagne, they've got the girls around them. I'm like, mate, that's your job. It's your job to be running that event. Anything could go wrong at that event. You have to be sober. You've got to be on the ball. You've got to know what's going on, because if the shit hits the fan, which it will do, you're the one that's responsible for it. And I just see them come and go, and it just doesn't last. It's very, very small-minded mentality.
What do you think was the first major behind-the-scenes problem that you were like, oh shit, I actually don't know how to fix this?
Probably the first time was petrol bombed, which was the night before we opened Sankey's, and the old door team.
Did you say the first time I was petrol bombed?
Yeah. So Salford used to run the door, and they wanted the door back because in those days, whoever ran the door ran what was going on inside as well. And, I'm talking about drugs. So the police said to me, there's no chance you're having Salford on the door, not a chance whatsoever. At the back of Sankey's was a power generator, and it was in a car park, and it was surrounded by a metal fence. And on the CCTV, you see this two little scumbags jump over the wall drag a bed mattress over it, entwine it in the metal thing, pour petrol all over it, and set it light. The whole thing blew up. But what was really funny was because Sankey's was in a mill, we ran off our own generator. So actually that weekend, the whole of Hancock's was just in pitch black, and we were raving. And it was like, you had this one rave in the middle, which was, quite funny.
Wow. So you said earlier about like one of the things that you've always kind of has been in your wheelhouse is this taking risk. So if I was a fly on the wall when you're having that initial conversation about Sankey's, what would I have heard?
We decided, when I say me, my business partner at the time, a guy called David Vincent, we decided to hire everything because we were getting intimidated by the old gangs at that point. And for the first few months, I was picked up by security from home. I was dropped off by security from home. We weren't allowed on the front door. Plainclothes police were constantly driving around watching what's going on. And we made the decision that if it gets too much, if it gets too full on, we'd just stop it. So for the first 3-4 months, we hired everything. And in fact, we opened Sankey's in 2000. You're doing all the painting, all the legal work, stocking the bar, having the float, putting the deposits down for the rental deposits, for the sound systems, lighting, everything. It cost 38 grand, which these days you couldn't open a club for less than £1 million, really, a proper club. So we just did it on a complete shoestring.
So we have so many different entrepreneurs on the podcast, and one word that comes up all the time is obviously this mindset piece. But that's like the risk. So I've got to have this strong mindset because suppliers might let me down. But you're talking about like actual intimidation. So it's not just your business that's probably at risk. There's probably like your life at risk.
Yeah.
How did you, if you think back to a younger Sasha, how did you kind of manage that mentality of what could go right, what could go wrong, and the pros and cons with that?
Do you know what? Every time something happened, it made me feel a bit stronger. The opening page of my book was I had a call before I opened Sankey's from a Mr. Big at Salford, and I mean number one guy, he's now dead. It was Paul Massey actually, and he said, I want to meet you tomorrow at 2:00 outside Dry Bar, which is on Oldham Street. It's closed now. Dry Bar was owned by the Hacienda. I was like, right. And I was putting student nights on for like 400 people at the time. So I was like, what does he want with me? Anyway, these two big 7 Series BMWs pull up, and I got in the back seat of the first one, and he set off. He turned around and gave me a Tesco bag. And I opened it, and there's 20 grand in cash in a Tesco bag. I'm like, I don't understand. It's like, well, it's like this. So New Year's Eve, you're going to hire the academy, and you're going to put the New Year's Eve show on, and you're going to sell it out for us, and that's the money to fund it, so we'll split the profits 50-50. I was like, right. Capacity at the academy is like 2,000. It's like, it's a bit out of my reach, this. It's like, who do you think is going to DJ? And it's like, well, you can DJ. I said, I can't DJ. He said, you sold out the Hacienda last week. I was like, no, that's DJ Sacha, S-A-S-H-A. I'm S-A-C-H-A. They literally screeched, opened the door, grabbed the bag off me and threw me on the pavement. That was my first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bloody. How did you? Because obviously there's been some run-ins, right, with gangs and stuff, especially in those early years. Was there a point where you managed to sort of find the balance and get people on side?
I think they gave up with me in the end, as the bigger I became when I grew out of Sankey, certainly into Warehouse Project. They kind of, because my head was above the parapet, they didn't really want to come up to that level. They were still at that point, so Warehouse Project started in 2006, they were still going for the smaller guys. But it's not like that now. It's completely changed to how it used to be. Completely changed.
What's different now? So if you were starting now, what would you be dealing with?
Just a business. That's it. None of that scare tactics, none of the taxing that was going on. It just does not exist these days. The police, Greater Manchester Police, really got a grip on it.
Right.
They really did.
And I suppose looking back now at where you're at, where was the point where you thought, oh, right, this is actually really starting to work?
So the Warehouse Project was never supposed to last more than 1 year. We started,
really?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a warehouse project, that was it. So we'd sold Sankeys, I'd sold Sankeys, and then we decided to put a few events on. We actually put 24 on that year, and we sold 100,000 tickets. So we were like, hang on, we've sold 100,000 tickets, we've done all right here, to be honest. We'll carry on again. The problem I had was Bonington's Brewery, where we started off, was right next door to Strangeways Prison. So the opening night, 6th of October 2006, we had Public Enemy on. It was a Thursday night, and my phone started ringing, and it was a withheld number. I never answer my phone if it's withheld. In fact, people are lucky if I answer it. I don't like talking to people these days. But it rang consistently over an hour. So in the end, I answered it. I thought it was going to be someone asking for guest list. It's like, is that Sasha Lord? Yeah, it is, yeah. It's like, it's such and such a body, the governor of Strangeways Prison. It's like, all right, hi, how are you doing? He said, not too good, to be honest. I was like, why is that? He said, well, all we can hear is your music coming through the prison. What time do you close tonight? So I said, well, it's a gig, actually, so we close at 11 p.m. He was like, right, okay. And then I said, but we're open again tomorrow night and Saturday night. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, actually, we've got 24 events over the next 12 weeks we're going to be operating. He was so pissed off with us. He went on record during those 12 weeks to say that because of the Warehouse Project, the spike of drugs in Strangeways Prison was purely down to us. And on a Tuesday and Wednesday, we'd get letters on Strangeways letterheads in the office to say, oh, I've just been on the internet. Love the set last Saturday night by Annie Mac. I don't suppose you're recording. You can send me a tape in. We're like, this is just nuts. So had environmental health all over me to say, look, you can't. You're causing major problems with the prison here. They're all raving every single Friday and Saturday. So that's why we moved it to Store Street, because I started Googling stuff, and it was the biggest air raid shelter in Manchester city centre during World War II. The walls were 12 foot thick. So yeah, we moved it there.
Wow. Did you do anything in those moments there to like handle that like controversy, or were you just like young and fuck it, bring it on?
No, I did things to try and corner the council a little bit. I thought, well, first thing I'm going to do is a PR exercise here. And it was really sad. So Bonington's, you're probably too young to remember this, but Bonington's was known as the Creeve of Manchester. There were loads of adverts on the TV. And generations after generations had worked in those factories, in the breweries. And a few months before we moved in there as the Warehouse Project, TV was showing grown men, elderly men with boxes of their stuff, leaving, crying. You know, that had been their job. It had been their dad's job, their granddad's job. So I thought, you know what we'll do as a nice thing, but also PR exercise, is I'm going to invite all those people that used to work at Bonington's to come down. We put a buffet on, we put a free bar on, and they can enjoy the rave as well if they want to after. They didn't stay for the rave, but it got front page of the Evening News. And then how do you kind of shut something down when you've done something like that? There was one night when, by the way, what was really bad is I paid for police to work on those nights. Police work every single Warehouse Project night, or used to when I had it anyway. And the old fellas were getting in their car after like 8 free pints and driving off. I was like, oh my God. But you'd see them before they were leaving, stuffing sandwiches in their pockets as well and things. It's like, oh, the police aren't watching this. But there was one night in particular where environmental health told me if they get one more complaint from the prison, they're going to walk in, serve me paperwork, shut me down. And you have to serve the paperwork on a director. I was the only director. They were parked outside in the car. We all saw them. So we had a plan. We put a ladder up on the back wall. Because I phoned my lawyer up when I saw them at 9 o'clock and said, look, environmental health are sat outside here. They're going to serve me papers tonight because it's a drum and bass night. So he said, well, they have to serve it on you. They can't serve it on anyone else because you are the only director. So we put a ladder up on the back wall. And when environmental health entered the premises, I jibbed over the back wall on the ladder and I drove home and they couldn't serve anyone. So we just carried on raving that night.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God. I'm so tired. I've just been talking to qualified prospects all day without any wait time.
How have you been doing it? Because I've been cold calling people on my mobile and I reckon I've spoke to one person.
No. Stop that right now and use Nooks.ai.
Why? What does Nooks do?
It finds me the right people to call and it calls them and it connects with them over and over and over again.
So you're saying it's Nooks.ai and I can just be speaking to qualified decision makers all the time?
No other better connection rate.
Wow, Nooks.ai. I mean, the story is
amazing.
So it feels like you just strike me as one of these people that whenever you get that bug, you can't shake it off you. You're like, I'm on this. So you've done this first year of Warehouse Project. At what point did you decide, I feel like there's something bigger, I feel like we could really run with this now?
I think we knew Warehouse Project was going to hang around longer than a few years, probably about 2010, 2011. That's when we started to win accolades, win awards, and people started to travel, not just from Manchester, but all over the UK and abroad on sometimes. You know, they'd come from Amsterdam, from Germany, from France. And that's when we realised something's really special is happening here. So, yeah, I reckon about that period. Yeah.
What do you think's been the relationship between music, drugs and nightlife? How do they all connect and what have you seen change based on each one?
They're so entwined with each other. It's not a new thing. You know, they won't admit to it, but your mum and dad, when they were going out partying back in the day, I'm not saying they did it, but they will have known it was around in the venue.
Oh, they did it.
Fine.
Hard.
And, you know, any person, any operator in the UK that runs a nightclub that says to me, I've got no drugs in my venue, either A, they're stupid, or B, they're lying, because they are in every single nightclub in the UK. You'll never stop it, ever, which is why I've always been a big advocate of drug testing, because I'll talk about Strangeways again. If you can't stop drugs getting into a category A prison like Strangeways, what's you supposed to do with a nightclub with a front door? You've got, 6 lads from Wigan like stood there or Parklife. Think about how many entrances there are to Parklife, 80,000 people, it's a field. There were always going to be drugs there. And that's why I've said drug testing is the way forward, and education. I even take it a step further that some people have a go at me on socials for, but I think it should be part of the curriculum at school. You know, I think it should be part of, listen, there's this drug out there that somebody will offer you when you start going clubbing called ketamine. If you do ketamine, this is what's going to happen to your bowel over a period of times. You know, and people don't know that. They just do it. And we used to say stuff at Warehouse Project like, we don't condone the use of drugs, but if you're going to take a tablet, then crush, dab, wait was the slogan. What does that mean? Well, rather than necking a whole tablet in one go that could have poison in it, you could have PMA or something that's going to, affect you badly. Crush it, try a bit, wait half an hour, 45 minutes, then do a little bit more. And that is educating people the best way to take drugs and the safest way to take drugs.
I wonder about that, because there's a trade-off, isn't there? There's that initial boom of ecstasy that probably stopped a lot of violence in clubs initially. Yeah. But then it probably stopped people buying as many drinks. So there's like a business almost trade-off there of like, well, the doormen seem happy because they're not having to batter people all the time and chuck them out, but then we're not spending as much money on the bar. Have you noticed there's almost like business changes that seem to go hand in hand with drug culture as well?
There is at the moment. People are taking less drugs, and in fact, I mean, this stat would have amazed me when I was 16, 17, 18, going out, going to a club and then ending up buying a kebab and then probably throwing the kebab up on the floor somewhere in a corner. Now, people under the age of 25, 1 in 5 don't drink any alcohol. And I put it down partly to, obviously, it's very, very expensive to go out now, to buy a pint. I was in London a few weeks ago, £8.20 for a pint they were charging in London. Manchester now averaging around £6. It's pricey. They're just not drinking as much, not taking as many drugs. And I think the likes of Instagram and TikTok that I mentioned, everyone wants to look great. It's about what you're wearing. It's about, what you're eating, going to the gym, that kind of thing. I'll go on a slight rant. I have a big problem. I also think Instagram and TikTok is ruining clubbing. And there was a great article actually in The Telegraph a couple of days ago by a journalist called Poppy Platt, who I've spoken to about this. Back in the day at Warehouse Project, we'd put the set times up on a Friday or a Saturday night. So if we've got David Guetta playing, at 12 o'clock David Guetta's coming on. So at 5 to 12, no one's at the bar. Everyone's on the dance floor. At 2 minutes to 12, the energy is phenomenal. It's better than anything, whether you're on drugs or not. The energy in that room is superb. Then he comes on, everybody loses it. Everyone forgets their problems. They're there for one reason, for one person, for that music, and it's a massive explosion. Towards the end of Warehouse Project years, for me, and Parklife, that went, it had gone. And now you see a sea of people aren't dancing, they're just there with the phones and the torches. I'm like, guys, this is not what it's about. You're ruining the dance floors. And I think places like Berghain in Berlin and other clubs in Berlin, there's a club that's just opened in Manchester called Amber, started to put stickers on the back of phones now. That's the right way forward. Because they're killing the dance floors. It's not... And you're talking, I'm seeing now, I'm being told numbers of events and clubs that are starting to nosedive. And I honestly believe that's because the energy is not the same.
Do you think that from what you know about this generation and what you've seen throughout your career, do you think that it can get to a point where kind of the pendulum swings the other way? And
it will do. It will do, because it goes like this. Constantly as a roller coaster, it goes. In 3 to 4 years' time, people are probably drinking again and taking drugs again. I think the lockdown period has a lot to do with it. If you think about 18 months, kids that are out clubbing now literally sat in their rooms, WhatsApping people, playing stupid games, and the social element was taken away from you, and I think it has definitely affected people.
So you're involved in these conversations on a regular basis. So what do you think are, if you're responsible and you're thinking right, these are the cosmic shifts that we should be trying, we should be doing this more, what do you think, especially when you look out at Manchester, what are some of the changes that need to be made imminently to get more people out?
I think we desperately need a new influx of younger promoters to come through. It's getting a little bit stale, the same lineups, same venues, same lines. It's getting a bit boring, to be honest. We need a new influx of new blood. I'd like to think, I started sort of 30 years ago, I'd like to think there were new people out there, new little Sashas coming through, starting with the 200, 300, 400 capacity venues and then looking to build. There are some great promoters at the moment, a guy called Ollie Ryder who runs the Loft and Progress Centre and thing. He's certainly one to watch. And you probably recognise the surname Ryder as well. There is a link there. But yeah, there's a lack of good young promoters out there. And when I say good, I'm talking about ones that want to do this for a job, not just to pick up a load of girls on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Zach Thompson, do you ever get sick of calling kebab houses and nanas when you're trying to speak to qualified decision makers?
I do.
Well, I think I might have found the solution. 98% correct qualified data, which means when you're cold calling, you're always going to be speaking to the right person. Do you know what the solution is?
It can't be Prospeo, can it?
Prospeo? Let me spell it for you. Prospeo.
.io.
Wow, if you're looking for great qualified data, then you know what the solution is.
Prospio.io.
Prospio.io.
Yeah, that feels like a byproduct of the TikTok, Instagram thing of like appearances.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a shame. What I suppose on that then, because obviously that kind of amplifies the ego part. I imagine for you managing a lot of these venues, whether it's in the team or the acts that you've had to manage, there has been ego that's come into it. What have you learned about managing some of those bigger egos and still making it work?
When you say, are you talking about artist egos or staff members?
I left it open in case you wanted to tell us an artist story, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
No, I mean, I'd say about artists, I've always looked at artists like, sorry to bring up football again, but like football leagues. So you've got the Premier League.
We've heard of that.
So you've got the Premier League, the likes of Calvin Harris, David Guetta, Fatboy Slim, Carl Cox, Josh Baker, who's huge at the moment from Manchester, Wilmslow actually, South Manchester. They are genuinely really down-to-earth, lovely people. The arseholes are the ones that are trying to make it and, are rocking up and asking for big riders, and they're just like, mate, what is wrong with you? And they rub people up the wrong way and phone you up complaining because they don't like the hotel room that you've booked them, and the driver's 2 minutes late. Oh. Like, oh, fuck off. There's one artist who used to be really big, actually. It's not fair, I'm not going to mention him. He's an American artist, and he was staying in the Malmaison Hotel. The artist entrance to Store Street was literally, you walk across the road from the Malmaison and there's the door to the artist entrance. I mean, the road's as wide as this room. That's it. Had to get him a taxi.
No.
He wouldn't walk across the road. Bizarre. There are some really, really... I mean, some of the rider requests we've had over the years, MIA, the day before she arrived, wanted a 6-foot blue inflatable elephant. Just stuff like that.
Did you get it?
Yeah, of course you did, yeah. Yeah, got it.
Wow.
The one actually who was really, really a surprise to me was... So I'm a huge fan of disco music, and I'm a huge fan of trying to understand how house music came out of disco and how it moved into where it is now. And there was a kind of a pioneering club in New York called Studio 54, owned by a guy called Steve Rubell. And he and Ian Schrager, actually, who now owns a lot of hotels, the who's who were in there. So like Michael Jackson, Bianca Jagger, all the big A-listers are in there. And Grace Jones was a regular. And we had Grace Jones at Parklife probably about 5 years ago. And this is the kind of person, when you talk about A-list artists versus B-list artists, these days your B-list, if they've got a sneeze, a sniffle, they'll cancel. That's it. And it's in the contract, you still have to pay them. Yeah, it's a nightmare. So she turned up, she'd flown in from Australia, became really poorly on the flight on the way there, picked her up, got her to the Lyra Hotel. We sent a doctor to her. The doctor said, there's no way you can perform. She was 69 at the time. No way you can perform there. And she said, no, I'm going to do it. They've sold 80,000 tickets. I'm going to turn up and perform it. 80,000 people weren't there to see her, obviously, because we've got all the different arenas. She went on stage really, really poorly, topless, with white tribal paint around her boobs. You can Google it. It sounds mental, okay? And one of the tracks was called Slave to the Rhythm, which is 7.5 minutes long. So you've got someone on stage that's just come off a flight from Australia that's got really fucking severe flu. She's got her boobs out with tribal paint on, singing a 7.5 minute song, Slave to the Rhythm, whilst hula hooping at the same time. She was literally like hula hooping while singing it, wearing these mental feathers. And I because she was connected to Studio 54, I'm not one of these people. I never have been one of these people who's, oh, can I be photographed? I want a photograph. I left that to business partners. But I wanted to have a photo with Grace Jones. So she was in a dressing room, and her rider was wild organic rock oysters with a rock oyster knife and a particular brandy. And I said to her, manager, can I have the photo? And he came out and he said, look, because she was the first black supermodel ever, so she was quite vain. She said, look, she's really not feeling good at all. But I've explained who you are and she's invited you in to go and have a chat with her. So it's like, really cool. So I walked into the dressing room. She sat wearing men's boxer shorts with a white T-shirt that was completely transparent. You could see everyone. Everything. She was eating these rock oysters, like with this knife, looking at me really intensely. Now, there's a really well-known famous story about Grace Jones, performed about 15 years ago at Glastonbury. And before she went on from her dressing room, she refused to go on until somebody slept with her. Could be anyone. She wanted someone to sleep with her. One of the crew put his hand up and like, I'll go and do it. I was in this porter cabin behind the main stage with her in boxer shorts and a T-shirt. And I'm thinking, any minute now, if she makes a move, I'm out of here so quick. I can't believe it. But she was there's a really famous interview. Go onto YouTube where Russell Harty interviewed Grace Jones. It's one of the most viewed YouTube clips ever. And he kept turning his back on her to speak to another person who was interviewing. And when he turned around, she slapped him across the face. So I thought she was going to be like a full-on diva. She was so kind. She was so lovely. And yeah, fair play to her. She's someone I really respect for that.
Wow. Would you say that's your biggest starstruck moment, or have there been others?
She's up there because she's an icon. I mean, starstruck moments are things like meeting Sir Alex or Jose Mourinho. Liam and Noel have both played for me separately. I'm 110% Team Liam. Such a nice, genuine, kind person. Noel's wife was horrible, actually. I'm quite pleased that they're getting divorced. And I think because of the divorce, that's why they reunited for Oasis, because it's an expensive divorce, yeah. No, I've never really been overly starstruck, not in terms of music artists. I think the one that actually I would have been if I'd had the opportunity to have met David Bowie, that would have really been the one for me. I actually have a tattoo on the inside of my foot because it's the only tattoo I have, but I was in Rome when he died. And I remember waking up in the morning turning Sky News on, and it was Eamon Holmes, who was the presenter at the time, talking about David Bowie had died. I'd only bought his new album that had been released 3 days before, Black Star. And I was walking around Rome thinking, is this fucking mental? That whole album that I've been listening to, that I was listening to on the flight on the way out here, he was curating his own death. When you look at the video, of like I'm a Black Star and stuff like that, he knew he was dying at that point, as his close friends did as well. None of us realised what that video was about until he died. And I then listened to an interview the same day with the person who designed the cover of Black Star with Bowie. And at the bottom of it, if you ever have a look, I just thought it was like a star that had been deconstructed. There were like 5 bits of a star. And he said, no, actually, that spells Bowie. And I went back to look at the album cover, and it did. And I found a tattoo artist in Rome and said, let's do this now on the foot.
Wow.
Tattoo artist should have told me, actually, at the time, that's probably the worst place to have a tattoo. Because A, it feels like torture. And B, because you put socks on and shoes every day, it rubs. So I've now got this like really faint tattoo that looks really shit, actually. But yeah, he would have been the one that if I'd ever met anybody. I had a weird experience. Tell me if I'm waffling.
No, keep going.
I had quite a good experience, again in Rome actually, during middle of Warehouse Project season, probably about 2009, 2010. I was quite stressed. So I took myself to my favourite hotel there. And in the middle of the day, I went to the spa area. They had a jacuzzi by the side of the pool. No one was in the pool. No one was in the jacuzzi. And I'd laid back like that, resting my head on the side of it. And I heard this splash. I was conscious that somebody else had got into the jacuzzi. And I put my head up over my eyes, and it was Robert Downey Jr. And like a plonker, I said to him, Iron Man. And he went, I think you'll find I'm Sherlock Holmes. And that was it, yes.
Wow.
Lovely guy.
So the passion for music, shines through, Sasha. So let's talk about the conception of Parklife. So where did that come from? Where did you decide you wanted to do more?
It was simple. So when I was at school, there was no concept about the prom, the American prom. It's like when I was a kid, Halloween was only just coming over from the States. It wasn't a big thing. Now it's one of the biggest nights of the year. So I was saying to the other guys in the office, look, there's no end of year prom really for the students of Man Uni, Man Met, Salford Uni, Salford Met, UMIST. There's nothing. Why don't we put a big end of year prom on? We've got the contacts and stuff because we've been booking the DJs at Warehouse Project. And I kind of seen a concept called, what are they called now? I've forgotten the names. But they tried to run an end of year student party in Plattfields. It didn't work for them. I'm still trying to remember the name. It'll come to me in a few minutes. So I said, let's do it at Plattfields. It's in the heart of Fallowfield, heart of Student Village. And yeah, year one, we sold out straight away, 20,000 tickets. Within 3 years, we were up to 34,000. And then we moved it to Heaton Park.
Was there ever a moment where you felt like this is maybe getting too big and out of your hands?
When it went past 50,000, it was because if something goes wrong at Warehouse Project, I could be there in 2-3 minutes. If something was going wrong in a 20,000 capacity venue, I could be there within a couple of minutes. When you get into 50,000, it's going to take you 7 or 8 minutes to get there, even in a buggy. And then when you were hitting 80,000, it's like, okay, so I'm now based in event control. And there's just, event control is literally a marquee at the back with wall-to-wall CCTV where you can monitor everything that's going on. And you've all got different desks in there. So police are in there, paramedics, NHS, security, environmental health, licensing, and you all work together, which is the right approach, how to do things. But at that point, it's just too big.
Our books are now open. If you are sat there wondering where your next sale is going to come from, wondering why your pipeline isn't full of meetings with qualified decision makers, look no further because the We Have a Meeting team has got you covered. Just go to www.wehaveameeting.com.
Speaking of books, if you are looking to get better at sales, communication and making more money, our book, Sales is Therapy, is available on Amazon now.
There's probably a moment that's hard for people to understand it, but a moment where you go, okay, that's done enough now, it's time to move on, and we know you eventually have sold.
Yeah.
What was the start of that kind of thought of, okay, maybe I want to move on now? So
I took the decision in 2021. The buzz wasn't there anymore for me. It was a job. I was turning up to do a job. So I used to really enjoy the buzz of the tickets and the whole vibe about we're going to announce the whole season tomorrow morning. You don't sleep the night before that. It's like tickets are going on sale. And then you know whether actually the public think it's really good or really shit. And I missed that buzz. And I just wasn't getting it anymore. And I said to Demi, my wife, I said, I'm going into the office. I'm so miserable. My business partners were making decisions that I thought weren't very clever, weren't very good. I've been proven right. And I thought, do you know what, I'm going to jump out here. So Live Nation at that point owned half the business anyway. They bought it in 2016. So I went back to Live Nation and said, look, it's not cool. I'm not enjoying this. I want out. And they said, okay, well, would you stay on for 3 more years? I said, yeah, we'll do. So I stayed on till March 2024. And then was gone. Best decision I ever made.
You sound like you're not going to say the same thing here, but a lot of people that we spoke to who've done the building and then the selling have a moment afterwards where it's like, oh, it all feels a bit empty now. I'm missing the bit.
I think because I knew it was coming for 3 years, I was prepared. And actually my book, when it came out at the same time, I purposely coincided with that, Sales on the Dance Floor, Sunday Times bestseller.
There it is.
And that was my kind of farewell in the book. That was me getting everything out of my head onto paper. It was quite a therapeutic exercise to carry out. So I was geared up, I was ready. And a pure coincidence, well, it wasn't coincidence because we had to have sex for it to happen, but my wife became pregnant. So at least I hope it was me. And then my son Lowen was born, and I was in a really fortunate position that which not many dads can do. I took 12 months out to enjoy Lowen's his first year of life. We really bonded really well. He's now at nursery. Demi's now back at college studying nutrition. So I'm back out. I'm up and running again. I'm working again. There were days where you have to have a purpose when you wake up in the morning. And I sold at 52. It's too early to retire. And we've been in a really fortunate position that we've been on holiday after holiday after holiday this year, but every beach looks the same. And after a while, it's like, I put a stone on, just eating and like living the life. So luckily I've dropped the stone again. But yeah, I'm gearing up again now. I'm ready to work and to create things and get the buzz back. That's what I enjoy.
So as you've been spending that year, I imagine like you're in full-on dad mode, but there'll be points where you probably see things you're like, that. We know that every business solves a problem, and Parklife and Warehouse Project was entertainment. When you think about the economy and you think about Manchester and the world now, what are the top of your list problems that you feel personally responsible to solve?
Hospitality, that's the big one for me. It's just not just in Greater Manchester. I get contacted from people all over the UK. I think people saw what I did during the pandemic. So during the pandemic period, I was looking at what was going on, and there were 2 policy decisions that were absolute utter nonsense, made up and thought of by some complete lunatic in number 10. The first one was the 10 p.m. curfew that we had. Now, I know from running Parklife, you can't push 80,000 people out at the same time. It's going to cause absolute chaos. So, which is why stages to go quieter at different times, you turn them off, you create an organic, steady flow of people. So by pushing hundreds of thousands of people out at 10 o'clock, you're spreading the virus. It was dangerous. So there was that was wrong. And also, do you remember the Scotch egg rule, where you could buy a pint as long as you had a substantial meal? Fucking bollocks. So I employed a QC, now a KC, obviously, and I took Matt Hancock to court, and I got him to drop both of those decisions. Government had to reverse the decisions. So Demi and I go to bed every single night at 10:30. It's my job to take Pickle, our miniature dachshund, out for a wee. When he's out having his wee, I have my wee in the downstairs loo. And it's framed in the downstairs loo, Sasha Lord versus Matt Hancock. High Court ruled in my favour. It's the best way I have every day. I think of his little face and his pink tie and that horrible Hancock. So I think because of that, people started to reach out to me to problem solve for them. And we've got a big job on our hands. I was a Labour Party member. I was a Labour Party donor. I was at the Labour Party manifesto last year here in Manchester when the Chancellor said, I am the Chancellor of Business and Growth. She's not. She's absolutely not. Hospitality is on its knees. Retail is on its knees. The economy is on its knees. The NI increase was one of the worst decisions that could possibly be made. We've got a budget coming on November the 26th. I don't know if this podcast time sensitive as we talk, but there's more tax coming down the line. She's going to break 2 of her manifesto promises not to increase tax. How can you? I don't understand how you can ask the public to vote for you on the back of a lie. It shouldn't be legal. If you say vote for me and I'm not going to put up taxes, don't put up taxes. Or at least, if you want to, send it back to Parliament and let more people have a vote on whether the government should be allowed to. So it's wrong what they're doing. It's very wrong what they're doing. I think we've now got all this infighting that's coming out in number 10, all this leaked stuff about this MP wants to take Keir out and that MP wants to take Keir out. And stop infighting. Govern the country. That's what you've been paid to do, and sort this budget out that's coming in 2 weeks. And it's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing.
So many people would just take the money from Parklife and just, like you say, sit on the beach or invest in a couple of different businesses and live off the dividends for the rest of their life. Why do you have this passion about the hospitality industry? I
think because, I said before, I've been in the industry for 30 years. I left school with 2 U's and an E. The city, Manchester, allowed me to do all these mental, crazy things with my events. I really respect that. So I feel like I have to give back to the city now. This is my moment. I spend a lot of time driving around speaking in colleges. I think kids who... So when I was at school, I was extremely anxious. As a 15, 16-year-old, I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. Everybody else, kind of the geeks, knew exactly what they were going to do. They were going to be lawyers, going to be accountants, doctors, dentists, nurses, whatever. And I was so stressed. So if I can spend my time now taking a bit of that anxiety out of a kid who's 15, doesn't know what to do, and I can say to them, look, I didn't go to university. I didn't do well on my A-levels. Sounds like I'm bragging, but this is what I say to them. I created, when I sold what was the biggest nightclub in the world, biggest metropolitan festival in the UK, Sunday Times bestseller. I'm the chair of the Nighttime Industry Association, Greater Manchester's first nighttime economy advisor. All these things that when I was 15, 16 were not even on my radar, absolutely impossible. If it gives some kids hope, then I think that's a good way of spending my time, and I enjoy doing that.
I've loved this, Sasha. I think it's been one of my favourite conversations ever.
Thank you.
The stories, it's been amazing. Melissa, our editor, sat in the corner. She's got a tough job to make all the clips out of this.
Okay.
We always end the podcast the same way. Yeah. If you could leave people with one question, they could be asking themselves about the way maybe they're living their life or the way they're planning their future, what would you leave them with?
I would ask everybody, are they happy in their lives? Now, a lot of people think having a lot of money is the be and end all to happiness. It's not. It really isn't. And in fact, I'd say the opposite. It comes with a lot of stress and problems. Are you happy? Are you happy in your job? Are you happy in your relationship? I don't want people to start breaking up on the back of that. But, are you happy? Because life is so short. I'm 53 now. I remember putting my first night on like it was yesterday. I was 23, and it's moving extremely, extremely quickly. And I just look at yourself. Are you happy? And if you're in a situation where you're young and you don't have a family, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, so you don't have all those overheads and people relying on you, but you have a dream, and you have a dream that's a business. If you're not enjoying your 9-to-5 job, go and do that business, because the absolute worst that can happen is it fails. But every time it fails, you learn from those failures, and that's something I've always done throughout my life. I've had so many failures, and I still fail now. My wife would say on a daily basis, but every time you fail, you learn from that failure, and that's what creates success. So if you're not happy with your life, do not live a miserable life. Turn things around. You've got time. Just go and enjoy it.
I know you can't say what's coming next, but we look forward to seeing what there is. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.